sell. Hold on. I got this thing I'm going to do. Ready?
Something happened?
Did you guys not hear that?
No.
No.
You know, I'm starting to get annoyed with this whole thing. Hold on, wait. What about this?
I tried to sing it.
This podcast is part of the Shareable Podcast Network. Learn more at shareable.fm. I'm the kind of guy that figures stuff out. I got to do something about that stretching. Did you notice that the video is stretching a little bit? I don't like that. It's bad.
Yes, I did notice that. I didn't think it was with the video. I thought it was the graphic itself on the video.
No, it's just the video stretched. Anywho, Sarah, you're in charge now. Go.
Oh, perfect. Well, actually, I'm going to turn it over to Tim because today we are talking about building strategies for our business and why they matter. And so Tim's going to take the lead because this was actually an idea he had that I thought was a very, very good idea that every business needs. So Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you. And then I know we're all going to be active participants today. So this will be fun.
Hi guys. Today we're talking about strategy. I'm here with 3 other individuals who all have like a lot of experience in that. Jeff's been working on brand and marketing strategy for a long time. Sarah has been working in marketing strategy for a long time and now implements a lot of different, even though she's not working in marketing anymore, she implements a lot of those same techniques in her own business. And Parshell is working on content for education, specifically video. And she helps people like create strategies and then builds deliverables out of those strategies. So we're in good company today. I wanted to talk about strategy a little bit because in my own work, I notice how clients. I'm surprised at how clients a lot of times don't build frameworks, don't have a good idea of what their objectives are, and don't have a good idea of how they can begin to build like solutions towards meeting those objectives. And so I guess I want to kind of start with Jeff today, just because Jeff's been working a little bit more broadly in strategy. And I wanted to see like what you experience with the clients that you're working with, and how you help them frame what's important in building strategies and why they should build strategies. I hope that question's not too broad.
No, I think broad is a good place to start because I think ultimately the problems that I've seen in the last like decade or more of doing strategy is that the problem is a fairly broad problem. It's a problem of definitions as much as anything else, which is that I think when I say goals to some people, what they hear is priorities or things that they want. When I say strategies, what some people hear is tactics. When I say tactics, what some people hear is strategy. So like, I think part of the challenge is that based upon your depth of experience in working in strategy, you have a more nuanced understanding of the different components that go into building out a plan and how that works around an objective specifically in business, but it can be in any context. So I would say that the first and foremost thing that I've found in helping clients to implement strategies more effectively is to first start out by getting everybody aligned around what we mean by certain terms, what we're trying to get out of it, and really not being afraid to push people. Because I think in my early strategy career, I was a little afraid, when I was younger to push people who were my senior and who had been in business longer. When I said like, tell me what your business goals are, I would be afraid to really push and lean into that and ask them, no, really, I'm going to need you to get more specific than like, we want to be the best in the market, right? Like we have to really define what it is that we want, or we can't actually solve that problem. So I'd say first, aligning around the definitions, and second, pressing a little bit more to get specific about things.
Now, when you say aligning around definitions, do you mean like definitions and like when they give you what their goals and objectives are, you want to get them like really precise into what that means, like what those specific goals mean? Like is that what you're saying?
Partly. I would say, let me retract and rephrase. I'll say what you're looking for is clarity, right? So clarity on the one hand means if you say that you have a goal, I really want to make sure that I truly understand that. I need to be able to repeat back to you exactly what it is that you're after. If you tell me who your audience is, I need to be able to understand and repeat that back to you as clearly and as specifically as you know it. So on that side of things, yes, there needs to be an understanding and clarity around what you mean when you say something. On the other side of it, the part that I was speaking to initially is that when I say strategy, tactic, challenges, priorities, objectives, all of these words mean different things to different people because we all come from different backgrounds of, usage of different words and what our understanding of those words mean. So I'd say what I was referring to is that when I sit down with a client and we're going to do strategy work, I first identify what I mean when I say goals, for instance. When I say I want to know what your goals are, what that means is I need to know specifically what you want, that is measurable, that is attainable, that is relevant, and is timely. So SMART goals, right? I want something that I can define. Did we do it or did we not do it? Saying we want to be the best at X is not a measurable thing. It's not a thing that I can say my strategy worked or my strategy didn't work. So to build an objective-based strategy, you have to first get very clear on what objectives mean. Now, they may have different priorities. Like, we want everyone to love coming to work. That could be a priority. Great. We can bake that into how we design our strategy. And we really should, if that's an objective, if that's a priority, but that's not an objective. An objective would be, we want our internal net promoter score to consistently exceed 9.0. That would be a goal related to the employee engagement, but a priority would be, we want everyone to come in and enjoy coming to work, right? We want 95% participation in non-mandatory, employee out of working, events. That would be another way of setting an objective that you could build a strategy around. So I have a philosophy around like how strategy is built. And one of those things is about the objectives. So that's what I meant is like, really, it's about clarity in the definition of the words that you're using. So you're sure that the client understands what you mean because they can't implement it if they don't understand it. And on the other side, to your point, making sure you understand and are very clear on what they're saying.
So I think it would be interesting, Parshell, if you could speak to this a little bit, because you have a really, you've really like made your business very specific in the types of clients that you work with. And so when you're like initially begin working with a new client on a new education program, do you find that your clients generally are in a space where they have very specific goals and they know really what they want to do? Or are you kind of oftentimes helping them really flesh out what those specifics are?
I think at this stage of where we are, we're helping them to flesh it out and to see what's possible. We are kind of getting into a territory that is new. It's new, but it's not being done. And that's an author who has a published work that's successful and then converting it into something else that's even more applicable and can create, passive income for them. And so, so with that, for now, it seems to be in my conversations to be something to be fleshed out. I have heard one bestseller that I had a conversation with who said that his goals necessarily aren't personal anymore. It's not about having a list to check off. It's more of just having an asset that generates revenue. Like that's how he sees this venture. So for some people, they do know that. And I think it just depends on what stage they are in their business. He's a bestseller, whereas another person that I talked to, they're just not sure. They're trying to figure out, is what I have worth going the length and the investment of creating into a course, right? And if they have a successful work, then likely their course will be successful as well.
Well, let me ask you about that a little bit, because if you have a client whose goal is to like, they just want a source of passive revenue and they have a lot of stuff that they can pull from to create like a course on that, like how, if they're really open, how do you kind of help them nail down what it is that's going to be the thing that brings them passive income? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's for what we're doing right now, it is some strategy ahead of time that we're starting to implement now, to where I want to look at their current audience size. I want to look at the necessity of the information that they have. For example, one speaker that we talked to, he's been speaking and training for 10 years, but never made an online course. And it may be that some of the things that he taught maybe aren't relevant anymore. So I think part of it too is understanding what's going to be relevant to his current audience and what he sees for the vision of his audience as well in the future.
Okay, so Sarah, like, can you tell me, based on your experiences when you were working with JKCP, how you typically approached new add-ons to your business and how you would market them in particular? Because I know you guys were constantly adding on new things to sell, new courses, new approaches. Like, how did you flesh out what your marketing strategy was going to be, and like if you were adding stuff all the time?
I would just call Jeff and ask him what he would do. No. No, truthfully, I was lucky enough that I did have other people that I relied on, right? Because, I'm one person. And so I was, I guess, comfortable enough in my role to know when I needed to consult with other people, when esports was a program that we added. It was one of our fastest growing programs. I knew nothing about esports. I knew what the chair looked like, and that was it. And so I think it was important that I always knew what are we trying to accomplish? Of course, who is our audience? Does this align with the brand that we already have? Because that was really important. We can't have a camp in our case that was so far removed from the other camps that we had. So even before taking things on, we went through a checklist that really said, does this align with the bigger brand, the bigger mission, the bigger purpose? From there, then, getting kind of to me, then I needed to know, okay, what do we know about this already? What programs have we already done that are similar, like drawing on past experience and what's worked? And then certainly, as I stated at the beginning, knowing who to call, who to get involved with, what strategic partners could we have that could help us. But a lot of that was, strategy based, because I think, and Tim, you and I have talked about this a lot. It's so easy to think, well, we need a website and we need a video. That's what we need. It's like, well, you don't even know you need that until you know the strategy of how you're going to sell it and what you're trying to accomplish. So I felt like we took, quite a while at the beginning trying to make sure it aligned, it made sense. We had a strategy before we started essentially buying things and doing physical marketing tactics. But certainly as a marketer, you like that bright, shiny stuff, right? It's so easy for me to call Parshell and say, I want this video. But if I don't know what I'm trying to accomplish by doing that, that could be a real wasted effort. So yeah, strategy is huge in that space.
Tim, do you mind if I just add one thing to that Sarah made me think of? Because Sarah mentioned about, in saying all of that, you had mentioned a part about does this align with our brand? And I think and also, we need a website, we need a video. Is that actually what you need if you think about your marketing strategy? Really alludes to the idea that strategy is not, it's not this kind of haphazard thing where it's like, oh, we need a TikTok strategy. It's the sort of thing where it's almost like building a house where you need to have a foundation and then you continually stack on top of that. So it's very difficult to have something like, say, a TikTok strategy if you don't have a brand strategy, for instance. It's very difficult to have an employee engagement strategy if you don't have a leadership and culture strategy, which also rests upon a brand strategy, right? And if you don't have a business strategy of what you're out to do in the world, it's difficult to have a brand strategy. So there's all of these strategies that are kind of layering on top of one another that help to take some of the guesswork out of future strategy work. When you get down to what's our Instagram strategy, you should have about 60% of those questions answered just by looking at your marketing strategy and your brand strategy. Because if you know what you're out to accomplish and what you're out to try and do and how it fits with, how it should fit with other initiatives that you're doing, it sort of starts to write itself. And I think that that's one of the two big dirty secrets of strategy, which is one, it's iterative and it has to build upon foundations. And two, that it's really all about asking questions. And once you ask enough of the right questions, you get to just provide the answer and look like a superhero.
Yeah.
I think just one more thing on that point. I think companies and brands and individuals waste so much time chasing what they think they need or what they heard is shiny and new, like TikTok. What is really aligning with your goals? And I think that foundation part is so critical, because we think we need stuff, but if we don't really analyze it, we're going to waste a lot of time, effort, and energy for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, Jeff, 60% of those questions come from your strategy and what you already know, versus you just having to repeat yourself all the time with every single vendor, everybody that you need to come on board to help with it. It's all done because it's already laid as the foundation. And the thing that comes to mind too, when I think of strategy for some reason, is sports. It's like going into a game, you have a strategy of what's going to happen that day on the court, And if everybody is not on the same, if one person didn't hear the strategy, you could completely lose the whole game, especially down to the points that really matter. You know what I mean? So I think this is such a good conversation. I'm like soaking it up, taking notes.
So, and you also mentioned like all the layers of the strategy, like you need a business strategy, you have a brand strategy, you need a brand strategy, you have marketing, and like a culture, internal culture strategy. If I know you work with a lot of different groups and you come in at a lot of different stages in the development of those businesses or nonprofits. So like how do you approach it if you're kind of like walking into the middle, let's say the middle of the game, as Parshell was mentioning before, you know what I mean? Like how do you recommend they move forward if they don't necessarily have all those foundational pieces firmly in place?
Yeah, I mean, more often than not, I don't get to start at the beginning. It's very rare that I get the opportunity to work with a client and they're like, okay, what do I need? And I get to be like, well, let's start with your business and brand. And it doesn't work like that too often. More often than not, especially given my background in social media marketing and running the agency and everything, people come to me and they're like, hey, we need marketing help. We need a marketing strategy. So I'm almost always coming in at that phase. And I see that as being 4 or 5 steps down because there's so many things that relies upon. So yeah, I get brought in and I get hired to do that. And that's what they hired me for. So that's what we're going to do. But it's my job to also point out the other gaps that they have that they need to start thinking about, right? So it's not so much like a sequential thing, but there are a number of things in a brand strategy, I'd say, that will help in a marketing strategy. There are also things in a marketing strategy that could help you in a brand strategy. But I think there is a sequence that I've grown very, very comfortable with. But typically what will happen is if I come in and we're doing marketing strategy and we're talking about, well, what social media channels should we do? What type of content? What sort of this? I start asking brand questions. And when it seems like they're not quite clear on that, then we have an opportunity to kind of piecemeal together a part of that strategy, right? Well, let's get clear on what your brand messaging is. And then that becomes a scope of work that we can work on and that then informs other things that they might need. I might learn after that, like, okay, we've done that brand strategy and messaging part and we're doing the marketing part. And now you're asking me about, how should we deploy our team and manage our resources internally? And then I say, well, okay, well, let's talk about your leadership and company culture and how do those things fit together? Do you have the right pieces in place? What sort of responsibilities do you want people to do? What are the things that you value as a company? That comes from brand strategy. So it's about asking a lot of the right questions, and you don't always get the opportunity to do it in the sequence that makes the most sense. You sometimes have to kind of jump around, but I think that it's the job of any strategist it's like what's those signs in the New York subway? If you see something, say something. Like that's my job as a strategist. I feel like is that if I go in and I see something, you don't have to do the work with me. You don't have to sign up to do additional strategy, but I'm going to tell you about it because I think that it's a weakness and it's a thing that if you got it taken care of, I think it would benefit you and your business. So that tends to be how I do it. I do what I'm hired for, but I always point out everything that I see that I think would be useful. And occasionally, if I can't do my best work because that thing is missing, I'll just do that thing. I'll be like, I did your brand messaging for you. It's this. I've listened to you. It's this. Review it. Let me know if that works.
I would imagine, like, because there are a lot of very large, complex organizations out there, that the vast majority of them have kind of like an adaptive approach to to building out their strategies because I'm just gonna assume that most companies like haven't fleshed it out in that sort of like foundational layered way. So like if they bring in a Jeff is going to work adaptively to kind of like fix, adjust, move things around, help flesh out things that may not have been fleshed out. And then at some point Jeff might leave and it's better than it was, but you know what I mean? Like, but it's not like they're going to rebuild it from the ground up. Like, I'm going to assume that just happens like the vast majority of the time. Like Sarah, when you came to JKCP, you were very young at the time, and that was a company like a long legacy. I'm assuming like just things weren't always perfect there. But, but as you worked there, you tried to flesh things out a little bit more than they were otherwise. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And I think what's important is Jeff's saying, companies have sort of a set of norms, a set of cultural things that happen there. You have a brand whether you like it or not. Like your brand could be terrible, but you have one, right? Because your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. So I think companies get stuck sometimes thinking like, well, this is what we don't have that. It's like, well, sometimes you do, but you actually don't even have an awareness of what it is. So I think it's really important to, one, really write these things down, work with, there's 3 people on this call that could really help you with this. Like, I guess I could help you also, but, how can you really understand what those things mean for your organization? That's the first thing, right? Know what it is. The second, though, is about being flexible enough to change over time. And so I think some companies can get really set in their ways and almost stagnant in their brand, their procedure, how they do things. So it's sort of like one foot should be firm and know who you are and have that really as a part of your company culture. But the other is to be nimble and flexible enough that when technologies change, when new social media is available, to be able to use the brand that you have and the strategies you have established, but then be open and willing enough to have new ones come in. So I would say it's maybe 70% set and 30% needs to be flexible. And I think that's one thing that made us really successful as an organization is we were really able to ebb and flow kind of with the times. So it was challenging sometimes. Sometimes it was hard, like how do we even do this? But I think it's just really important for companies to keep that in perspective.
And also, I imagine if there are any people who are vendors for companies out there and they're running small businesses who are working with other larger businesses, like most of us here, not everybody's going to be talking about brand with the company, or they're not going to be talking about marketing strategy with the company. Like you might be for instance, you and Jeff right now are working on Asana projects. And Sarah, you're working on productivity solutions for individuals and companies at the moment, and strategies for implementing, let's say hypothetically, a new productivity system is going to be important there. Even though that's a very specific objective you have there, how you implement those new processes are also going to require some strategy. And if you don't have strategy, I'm assuming they're going to fall apart or not be successful or not stick. So what specifically with, let's say, So Productive, what's the importance of strategy for your clients in those very specific areas that you're working with people on?
Yeah, and I have to credit this to Jeff a lot because so much of it is about frameworks. So to me, it's about having really a system, a strategy and a system to give clients that makes it easy, that they can remember it and actually do it. Because I can give you all the tips and tricks and hacks in the world, but if you don't have a strategy and an implementation plan to apply that in your real life, then you should have just not paid me and Googled that stuff and read about it. There's a ton of information out there. But I think when you're hiring a professional to really help you, it's because you need a plan, a strategy to actually implement what you're working on. And Jeff does just wonderful work around frameworks. And I think that's another way to think about strategy. It's like a framework from which we work within, and they can change and they can be adjustable, but it's kind of always there for you to draw on. The other big thing with strategy is it always, for me, comes back to why are we doing this? Why are we doing this in the first place? And so often I think strategy really provides our reasons and our insight for doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I'll add for the relative to the super productive and how strategy works for us there is that I think one thing that Sarah and I think to the credit of what we put together here is that we built it on some sort of foundational principles. So one of the nice things about that is that it means that we don't have to reinvent the wheel each and every time we're working with someone. This is kind of the importance of brand. One of the things that I think is central to the brand of Super Productive is that we want to make something that is easy to adapt and that is flexible and usable for people based on the way it is, but that fits within a variety of different sort of set frameworks that we use. So we have like 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that we could apply productivity systems, but they all are built upon a foundation of like, we want you to get more done at work so that you can go home and relax and spend time with the people you care about. That's at the center of what it is for us. And part of what makes that possible is that you have to strategically, in order to get people to do that, you have to build systems that are easy to use, which makes them easy to adapt, right? People are not going to adopt and adapt to a system if it's not easy enough to use, because we all use enough tools and technologies at work that if the new thing that you have to use is complex and you have to learn it and you could go back to your old way of doing it, because that's easier because you're familiar with it, then the system is not going to work at the company. So we've tried to build out systems, and we don't add new systems until we're sure that it kind of passes that smell test of like, is this easy to use? Could anybody use this sort of a system? Is it something that we think people will adopt and therefore be able to adapt to and bringing it into their course of doing things? And because of that, we believe that that will make them more productive and allow them to go home and spend time with those that they love because they got enough done.
Now, I'm assuming, like, let's say hypothetically there was a different system that they had, a different productivity system or CMS or something like that that they had prior to whatever you guys are implementing. I'm assuming, like, there's always going to be, like, a learning curve to some extent, no matter how easy you make it. So I'm sure there's some level of, like, well, here's the value of implementing this thing, which is going to make you go through that, even if it's small, like that, like, oh, I'm going to learn this, even though, like, it's easy for me to just go back to what I was doing before.
Yeah, and I bet every single person on this call could probably comment to this in their own unique way of doing work with clients. But like, if they come to you and it's like let's just take like a cooking example, right? They come and they want to learn how to make pizza, and they come and they've brought like mayonnaise and a variety of other, you're like, we have to rebuild this, right? So if they come in with a productivity system and it's a complete mess, like, we can't really slightly adapt that. We may have to burn the whole thing to the ground and rebuild it. Now, it's not about what you had. It's about what you need. It's about what you want to get to, right? So if we understand what their objectives are, regardless of what they brought in, we can build a thing that gets them to where they need to go, even if it's rebuilding it from scratch. And I'm sure Parshell can comment on this with online courses. Like, people might come in and say, oh, I want to build a course on, making baskets. And she might say, well, I don't know if that's going to be profitable. And also you have a lot more content about content marketing. Maybe we should do that, right? So you kind of have to advise the client based upon your understanding of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, what they have as assets and liabilities, things that they'll make it either challenging or make it easier for them. And they advise them the best thing to do.
I also always tried to do that when I was in a marketing role, is to explain. So vendors would say to me all the time, wow, no one's ever sent us all the marketing assets and the brand and all that as quickly, because I just had it on Google Drive and I shared the link, right? Like, I had that stuff locked and loaded, ready to go. On the other side of that equation, though, I was always saying to them, if there's something I'm missing, if there's something that you think of that I don't see, tell me. Like, yes, I've organized it, I have this all together, but I always wanted to be open to, as Jeff's saying, like, what do I need here? This is what I'm trying to accomplish. You help me understand what I need or what I might be missing. And I think with strategy, it's important that you don't get locked and set. It's really about, being firm in what you have, but open to, as I was saying before. But I think that's can be really challenging for companies. But knowing what you need, I think that's where a vendor can really help you determine what's possible for you in strategy.
So Parshell, when you were fleshing out what your offerings were going to be for your business in particular, what kind of like led you specifically down there, and what frameworks did you like? Is there a reason that you went down that direction based on like the frameworks that you were working with? And I actually not sure if that makes total sense. I guess what I'm trying to get to is like, how did you build systems that made sense for what you wanted to do? Like, when you started, was it kind of like a very loose, and you were just kind of like doing was everything like super customized, and then you kind of narrowed stuff down, or did you start from like a really strong foundation?
Yeah, I definitely started from a strong foundation, I feel like, because everything about this business is also, it's a marriage between what is needed, right? What's helpful, but then also like what I want to do as a creative. And like, that's at the end of the day, that's the foundation. So the culture and the values that we're infusing into this are authenticity, right? Being in your flow, your superpower, your genius. Like I grew up in church, and there were, the ushers that are supposed to greet you. For whatever reason, I was confused. Like, why did they put the meanest person in church to welcome people? Like put people where they need to be. And I just learned at an early lesson, like, okay, they shouldn't be in the choir. They should be over here. Like, and I just would reorganize where everybody was in church in my head, according to what they did best. And it's just like with this, I get to do that too, and really bring that together with who we work with. So for us, it's definitely built on that foundation. It's informing our brand. It's informing how I show up. I feel more connected to my identity at this stage in my career. And it's like all these things are sort of compounding on each other. And then the fact that I used to teach, it's like, well, damn, like this is too good. I cannot do this. It feels so right. It feels so good. And that's the foundation that this is going off of right now.
I don't know if you experience this in particular, but so, like I really admire like how you're approaching your business, and over the next few years, I wanna kind of like move it into that like a very specific direction, my business into a more specific direction. But like, because I feel like one of the biggest like strengths and weaknesses of creatives is that like you always want to do new things. But if you're always doing new things, you can't get really good at anything in particular. Or like maybe not anything in particular, but like, you know what I mean? Like there's always like, oh, that looks really cool. I want to learn how to do that. And I want to like sell that, you know what I mean? Or do this for my customers or something like that. So like, how have you been able to kind of like keep doing things that feel novel and creative and new to you, while also like implementing like a very, I don't want to say rigid, but a very like strong structure to your business?
I think it boils down to, for me, just like I said, choosing myself at the end of the day and what I feel really excited about doing. But there's also this element of like you just asked, like as a creative, we like to do new things all the time. And for me, I had to kind of look back at all the things that do excite me to find the common thread. And I think that's what it took. And I noticed that I'm really into learning. Like I dig if the person that I'm filming actually knows what they're talking about. And, and it's just, what are the things that sort of came together for me and what I enjoy, like what entertains me, and things like that. And I started just kind of see this common thread as a creative. And so now going into content creation, like we're just about to launch next week, our first series of a content series that I'm doing. And my coach, he specifically gave me a container. He says, I want you to put together a series of 10 things. Like it would be a series of 10. And I thought to theme it. And it just was this whole thing. And it came together because it was a container for me to create in. Does that make sense? Like I knew I could do 10. So now I'm thinking about the next 10, and it's going to be much different from the first 10. Because for me to start to keep doing the same things over and over again, I get bored, I get out of touch with it. And it's just like, all right, whatever. Yeah, so to have something new for me to do is also, I'm just noticing that. And so I'm trying to find ways to also build that in what we do, as a company. So.
And as Parshell was talking about that, Jeff, I was thinking about like your approach to business, because in a lot of ways, even though you don't work specifically in like classical creative field, you kind of operate in the same way, in the sense that like you're interested in all these things and your work ends up touching all these things. Yet, like if you were talking to or selling yourself to a potential client, like you can really clearly define like the kind of work that you're doing. I mean, I guess depending on what you're selling that day.
Yeah, I mean, I as Parshell was talking, I was like, that's literally how I approach what I would call non-creative work. I mean, I think all work is creative to a certain extent, but yeah, I think to your point, I don't think I would traditionally be defined as a creative, because I do a lot of strategy. The creative is some of the writing and the copywriting and brand messaging and things like that. But I am limitless in my interests. So I think of everything that I learn has a potential to be valuable in some way or another. So while I've been doing strategy now for more than a decade, the shape that strategy has begun to take and the way that I'm able to see how things connect consistently expands. So whether I'm, I could be learning about philosophy and the structure of logical arguments, that now informs maybe how I present an idea and how I use, present an idea with copywriting, let's say. Or how I coach, for instance. I could be learning about something in science, and that could in some way inspire me to go and watch a video, and that video could inspire a creative concept for a video for that client. Or I might just, a lot of times, one of the things that I've noticed that I do is I'll be talking with the client about something. I'm like, oh, it's like this video or like this thing, or a website. I just have like an endless bucket of examples of things that I've seen, and I bring them to the forefront, and they have absolutely nothing to do with what the client was asking about or talking about. But I'm like, it's about the format, like try and imagine your content, but in this format, or like see that movement that they're doing there. It's like that. So I guess my point is that whatever work you're doing, everything that you learn, anything that you do will naturally increase the scope and scale of what it is that you're able to offer to your clients. And it may not be immediately evident, but like the thing I think about all the time is like when I was in my late teens, I used to work in retail, and learning how to fold shirts and pants. My closet is now absolutely beautiful, and it causes me to watch a lot of stuff like Marie Kondo and read books on minimalism and this and that. And I've learned stuff from that. For instance, I read a book on organization and decluttering that I sent over to Sarah because it has a framework and a concept that I thought was really interesting. Had I never worked in retail and folded my shirts, I might never actually be this type of person whose closet is immaculate, by the way. And I wouldn't have come upon that framework to send over to Sarah to inform the productivity work that we're doing together. So I just see it as anything that you learn. If you approach your work creatively, you're able to connect the dots between just about anything that you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. It's like everything that we've absorbed, right? I was reading this this article which says like, our bodies, our DNA and everything, it's like it's just recording tapes all the time. Even the things that we're not aware of, we're actually learning, and it's being taken in as memory all the time. And I think that where you are, your environment is going to give you different information that, like you said, pours into your creative work and just your ability to even talk to people. I don't know how. It's like I feel like because I've been around so many different people in different places, I feel like I can talk to anybody, and find some way to relate to them. So even when it comes to in business, just being able to connect with people, just when you're just more well-rounded outside of just what you do for work, I mean, that'll really drive, connection, rapport, and all that stuff that you need to do your work too.
100%. Actually, the thing that I tell people all the time, because people talk to me about podcasting a lot, they'll ask me questions because I've been doing it since like 2013. I'll be like, oh, well, did you monetize it? An audience? I'm like, nah. You get to talk to amazing people. They will like set aside an hour to talk to you. And if that's not reason enough. And what I've gotten out of that is that I've gotten the opportunity to speak with everyone from like marketers and salespeople to sex therapists to, bankers to like, I've talked across the gamut. And kind of Parcel's point, I feel like just engaging in that and being curious, which I think is part of this creative concept that we're talking about here, is like, Tim, you're talking about being curious. You see something cool and you want to learn how it works, right? I see people that way. I talk to people on my podcast. I'm like, oh my God, you're interesting. Like, let me learn about you. And I think if you take that kind of curious attitude towards whatever you're doing, if we take it back again to strategy, you're going to be more well-rounded and be able to adapt when you're working with a client of any sort.
Also, I was just going to say on as far as like intake is concerned, on intake of information and new ideas and new concepts and new way of living, like there's something to be said for having a structure in a lot of different areas of your life, because you can kind of like maximize the benefit that you get out of all these intakes. I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know if you guys can help me out a little bit, but I'm just thinking like, for like, you can like kind of like wander around and randomly intake different things. But if you have certain areas that you're interested in, like you guys were mentioning, and you have certain goals in mind, like you can intake specific content to feed like certain outcomes. And I think there's also there's definitely a benefit to having spontaneous, like serendipitous, like things hit you all the time. Like, I don't know, there's this PBS series on YouTube. It's called Eons. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it just kind of like goes through, it kind of like talks about random stuff that's happened on the Earth's history. Like, for instance, there was this period of like 2 million years where it just rained on Earth everywhere all the time. And it talked about like the outcomes that happened. They had this one on pandemics, I think. And I guess I'm going to like out of the way, but like it was talking about how there was yellow fever in Haiti, and the French soldiers who occupied Haiti at the time. This was during the colonial era, led to like they lost 85% of their military. Haiti became independent, and then the French decided to sell the Louisiana Purchase to the United States because they could no longer defend it because all their military got wiped out in the Americas, and it was all because of this disease that was like killed their soldiers from mosquitoes. And it's just like the whole series has stuff like that. And I know I'm going on a random tangent, but like that's just one thing where I just like I get high, well, not literally high. I get high from watching that, and it's just kind of like the serendipitous thing that I ran into, and it makes me think about how little things can have really dramatic effects on everything from your work to your life to other things. You know what I mean? Like that one person, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say there's a TED talk called "Where Great Ideas Come From" or "Where Good Ideas Come From." I forget, and it talks about how I forget the guy who did it, but he talks about how essentially most people think of like genius or like big ideas coming from like there was a Galileo sitting or Newton sitting under the tree and the apple falling on his head, right? Like a bolt of inspiration, right? But what it turns out is that it happens in environments where ideas of differing ideas and opinions collide together. So he talks about the importance of like the pub and like coffee shops and how these are environments where new ideas come together because you're basically colliding together different perspectives. And that's where creativity comes from, is from the collision of differing ideas and putting something in a context in which it doesn't belong. That's one of the contexts of creativity. So I think you're right on with that. It's like, there's a connection between all of these different things. And as a strategist, I guess just for myself, I find that I have a major propensity. I'm drawn to that. I'm drawn to like finding connections and things that are so wildly apart from one another. And I love trying to make those connections.
Yeah, I think that's where strategy though is like so impactful, because when you have a general strategy at play, like for your business, let's say a business strategy, when those ideas come up, instead of being like, oh, I don't know how that aligns, or I don't know how that's going to fit in, you can figure out how it's going to fit in, or you can more quickly say, no, that's not going to work. And I think that's where like those ideas collide with strategy is really where you make some really good business decisions to either do something or to not.
Yeah. I can see like that. I don't know. When you see like a television show that like has just these like specific characteristics of it, you're like, oh, I've kind of seen this before, but it's like done in a new way, and which makes it stimulating, and then I'm like hooked on it. Like I imagine like businesses often operate that way, where they'll offer like let's say hypothetically their primary services here, but but because they combined it with this one thing, suddenly everybody sees it as this like, oh wow, that's an inspiring new thing. Like let's say like the iPod, when it first came out, there were digital MP3 players like well before the iPod came out. I think even the Zune was like pre-iPod, but like
Zune was after.
Oh, Zune was after? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Zune was after. It was like SanDisk or some of the other ones that were before it. But the Zune was a response to it. Yeah.
Well, there were definitely like smartphones before the iPhone, and there were digital MP3 players before the iPod. But when the iPod came out, it had combined like a certain like set of like just form and function into it that just made people be like, oh, that's the one. And then like the rest ends up being history. And it like, those kind of things can shake up the marketplace. I mean, like if you look at social media now and all the different ways that you can advertise like digitally nowadays, like you can create some like really creative strategies towards like getting your product ideas, services across. Like that's something that I'm personally really interested in right now, is like how are all the ways that you can use these new platforms that communicate in like different ways to use like, let's say, video in a different way, you know what I mean? Or just like kind of like reinvent these old technologies for like new platforms. Yeah. Anyways. So what are you guys obsessed with this week?
Well, I am in my final days up in Rhode Island. So I am kind of obsessed right now with like taking it in because I've been here for a month and it's been just the most wonderful experience. And Tim and Jeff were able to come visit me up here, which was awesome. But I really am trying to be present in these moments. Like I always try to be, but I feel like when you have this looming, like I'm going home in a couple days, it's just, this morning I went over to the cliff walk, which we did, and I was standing at the ocean like, okay, I've got 48 hours left, and it's wonderful, and I'm blessed and privileged to be able to do this. But I think what I'm trying to always do and help clients do is like be in this moment and be on the journey. And I coached a client this morning, very motivated, and she's like, but I want to be here. And I'm like, right, but like the journey is part of it. And I think that's cool. And I think that's something I'm certainly trying to do, in the next few days, but always. It's just been like a good reminder for me lately. Like, this is part of it. Enjoy it. It's not about always where you're going. Sometimes it's about where you are.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember you saying to me, Sarah, not long ago, like, oh, like this is just a season or something, right? Like you kind of referred to it as like the ebbs and flows of running your own business and all these different things. Is like, oh, well, this is a season, right? Like maybe it's a high season, everything's going really well, or maybe it's a low season and things aren't going so great. So that really resonates with me. And sort of what you're focused on is kind of similar to what I'm focused on. I had a number of projects that wrapped up towards end of May. So I kind of kicked off June with a slower schedule. And I decided not to kind of follow up too aggressively on anything that was coming in so that I could have a little bit more time. My parents are in from Mexico. So similarly, what I'm obsessed with right now is just giving myself the space to not be like ultra productive and not like really pushing myself like I normally do, and just appreciating the time that I have with them up here. I haven't seen them in person in 3 years. They're getting to see my daughter for the first time, which is like just warming the deepest cockles of my heart. And then, I'm trying to take a little bit of time to do some things professionally, mostly trying to, catch up on some of the projects that I've been working on for myself. And right now I'm obsessed with ActiveCampaign because I am moving all of my email marketing from MailChimp to ActiveCampaign. So if you're on my email list, expect that you're getting an email that says, hey, this is the end of MailChimp. Welcome to ActiveCampaign. And I'm really obsessed with the different things that can do. So that's been my professional obsession. My personal obsession is hanging out with my dad, my stepmom, and my daughter, and my wife, of course.
That's awesome. Yeah, for me, I think I shared with Jeff this organization, or as a company called Cave Day. I think it is Cave Day. And essentially what it is these sessions where you can join in with a group of other people who are showing up to hold each other. Well, you get there and you share what you're going to accomplish in that sprint. And then someone just basically guides a work sprint. And it's a bunch of people on there. That has been really cool. And I actually had the idea for it with Jeff when we were in Philly.
We did it 4 years ago, I think, was when we started.
Yeah. I was like, I just want to just have a place where I can work with people. It was weird. Like I would show up to like a coffee shop or think to go to a coffee shop or something, but I would want to bring a friend, but not to hang out and talk, but to work, like, hey, let's go work. And at the time, not many people took me up on that offer as much as I wanted to go and do that. And so I thought maybe we could create it. And that was the idea we had then, but to see it kind of done in this way, it's really cool. And it's just been helpful because that's what I had wanted all this time. So I do get to meet people who from all over, and you just say, all right, this is what I'm focused on today. We give each other a high five and everything is timed. If you sign up for 3 sprints in a row, they kind of guide even when to take a break and all this. So it's just kind of cool to do with other people. I find that that's like supportive and helpful to me. And then on a personal side, because that's like on a professional, because I've been getting shit done. But on a personal side, this weekend, I'll be in Virginia to see my family. Cool. And that'll be cool. So I haven't seen them probably, I think it's been like a year or so. So I'll get to see basically all of my family. I'm the only one out here on the West Coast. So literally my mom, sister, brother, and their husband's wife, and 6 grandkids all live like within 20 or 30 minutes from each other. So it'll be cool to see everybody and have a good time and to enjoy it.
Parshell, we had something. We were onto something. And Sarah,
I know,
you're
man.
onto something with the productivity power hours. Do not
Yes.
stop. Keep
Yep.
pushing on
Don't
it.
stop that. Oh my
Parshell
God.
and I were both WeWork members at the time, and we spun up a website, weworkonweekends.co.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
were trying to do like these 4-hour sprints on Saturdays where like you could
Yep.
come in, hang out with us, and Parshell and I would work on our own stuff, but we'd also be there to kind of facilitate and coach and like provide strategy and like guidance. And like we probably put in like 30% of the effort into it that we probably put into like virtually anything we do nowadays, but we were definitely onto something way ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Story
So
of my
Thanks
life.
for
check it out
saying.
if you haven't
Thanks
seen
for saying that,
Yeah.
Jeff. The productivity power hours have been awesome, and like the people, I think it's hard for people to know that they want it or need it, and then the people that have done it with me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I got so much done, and it was 52 minutes." So it's pretty cool.
Yep, totally.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know about that, so I want to hear what that's about too. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's really
Tim,
cool. Yes.
Tim, what are you into?
So I guess there are two things too. On a personal level, I found these this YouTube series. It's called like JCS. It's like a criminal psychology YouTube series, and they have all these like released interrogations of people who murdered other people on there, and they walk you through like the interrogation tactics they use and what like the psychology of the people that are going through them. And it's not really creepy. It's just like fascinating and weird to see like how different people react to these like stressful circumstances where they've probably been caught, but they can't prove that they've been caught. And they're trying to like control their nervous system to not like tip the police off. And by trying not to tip the police off, they're really tipping the police off that they're, you know what I mean? And yeah, that's really cool. That's been really
It's like real life Mindhunter.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's not like the cases aren't usually serial killers. They're just like some jackass who like, you know, murdered somebody. But it's anyways, and then on a professional level, Parshell, I don't know if you use After Effects or use roto brushing. I was just talking to Jeff about this yet. But the 2021 version of After Effects has this roto brushing tool, which you can essentially like cut out things from your video, like you can in Photoshop, and like move it over to something else or change the background or something like that. And it's just created like this whole new options of these different things that I can do in video. So I've been really enjoying that, and it's like really smart. So like in the past they've had these tools, but like you'd have to almost go frame by frame to fix it. You know what I mean? Because it would look weird. But the new one that came out is like they're implementing some like AI technology to it, and it can kind of like figure out what you're trying to do. And so it'll help you like frame by frame go through and make sure the tracking's fine. So you can like cut out like people from your thing, and then like if you want to put text behind it or just like put them on a different background, you can do that too. It's surprisingly fast. I don't think it's like fast enough for me to want to do it on every project yet, but it's like it's still really cool, and I'm looking forward to different things I can do with it.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for joining the Hero Council. We're gonna not be here next week, right? Because it's July 4th weekend. So, but we'll be back the week after that, and we're gonna have an episode on. We were talking about motivation, and so we're gonna do an episode on motivation when we get back.
Cool.
Yeah. So thank you guys, and remember to like, subscribe, follow, et cetera, on all our platforms, and you can download this podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. Although I'm way behind on uploading podcast episodes. So those of you that tune in live, you're getting the good stuff and you're not going to be behind.
That's right. There you go. Yeah. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.